Hello, my wonderful friends. Welcome back to our subreddit, IDoWorkHereLady, where people who actually work at places get mistaken for not working there, and the stories are super entertaining. In this episode, there are going to be 7 stories. The first is a nice and short one about a lady who doesn't know that she's talking to an owner. The second story features an original poster, or OP, who is mistaken as a newbie at work and gets picked on. The third is about an employee who doesn't believe that the OP is the owner's daughter. And the fourth is a wholesome story where a business owner puts a smile on a customer's face. Guys, I hope you stay for the stories today and do hit that subscribe button for future stories. Let's dive in! This first story is titled, I Can't Call Over My Manager Because I'm the Owner. So, the other day, I was working in my bakery with a few employees, and we were finishing up the day, closing up and cleaning. We closed at 9 p.m. and hadn't gotten to locking the doors as we were busy doing other things. I want to note that when I'm in my store, I always like to dress casually since I'm in the back most of the time. I was in a flowy, flowery dress. A lady comes in screaming on her phone and yells at us. It's about 10 minutes after 9, so we're definitely closed. She says, I need a chocolate cake with green and blue frosting. I instantly respond with the fact that we're closed, and if she wanted a cake, she would have to come back tomorrow when we're open again. I also mentioned that custom cakes require you to call in advance. She responds, you aren't closed. The door was unlocked and there are employees out doing stuff. I started to tell her that we only open until 9, and it's past 9, so unfortunately we can't take any more orders. I told her to come back tomorrow morning and we'll get this sorted out as soon as possible. She looks at me, all angry, and then she says the dreaded words, get me the manager. She said that she'll talk to them and see if they can make an exception. I denied her and told her that the manager, unfortunately, has gone home for the day since our business is closed. Like, lady, what can't you understand about this? Unless you're the Queen of England, the President, or someone important, you're not getting a cake right now. She decided to threaten me and have all of our jobs taken. Then she threw out this sob story about how she needed the cake because her father is celebrating his 90th birthday. I told her she has to leave the store and that she will not be getting a cake tonight. She then said to me, you don't even look like you know what you're talking about. I've been here multiple times, and you're just in a dress. How do I even know you're an employee? Being behind the counter doesn't make you an employee. She then asked to speak to one of my workers who were still in aprons. That's when I had enough and said, listen, you have to leave now. I do work at this bakery, and let me tell you one thing, even if you got a hold of the manager right now, the manager won't even have authority over me because I'm the owner of this bakery. I then proceeded to point to my cameras that watched the register and told her to look up there. She asked me why I got her to look up there, and I said, I want the cameras to get a clear look at your face just in case you try something malicious. Then I told her that she's banned from the store and that she's no longer welcome. I absolutely hate customers like this. I used to get that all the time when I worked at Quiznos. We also closed at 9, and the ovens were usually shut down. We started cleaning up like 10 minutes before. And there were countless times where groups, massive groups of people, would come in right on the dot or 5 minutes before and order like 20 subs. Then they'd argue that they made it on time. It really must be nice to be an owner of a store and ban somebody for life. I wish. This next story is titled, Employees Don't Know Who I Am. For the last 7 to 8 years, I've worked at a paintball park, and I know a decent amount about paintball. Over the last 4 years, I've only worked at the park during summers since I'm gone the other 8 to 9 months for college. The turnover rate is pretty high, so there are always new employees. This happened roughly 2 years ago during my first weekend back at the park. I had just gotten back into town 3 days earlier, and my friend, who's the manager, needed some extra help, so he called me in. I didn't realize they had new work shirts, so I showed up in a hoodie with the paintball park's name on it. At least I'm wearing something that has the name on it. The manager takes me to a couple of other managers and introduces me to them. He says, when I'm not here, he's basically the acting manager for the day and should be able to answer any questions you would have from me. With that being said, I'm pretty much an unofficial manager. A majority of the employees don't know who I am, which is normal. This always happens. However, there were around 5 to 8 of them who were on some power trip and were trying to stiff-arm me because they had worked there for 8 months. 8 months, and they already think they run the place. 2 of them were quote-unquote managers. In my eyes, they weren't managers because they're in charge of a small area and pretty much had no authority over anyone. As I'm working, doing my thing, one of these guys comes up to me and tries to get me to do a really crappy task that nobody wanted to do. They thought they were just going to hand it off to the new guy, a job which I already knew wasn't going to fly. It sounds pretentious, but I'm the only person who can handle big groups because I've done them all the time. So he kicks me off the group right in the middle and tells me to take out the trash instead. I said, whatever, and started doing the trash. The assistant manager who I trained years ago and the manager both asked me what I'm doing. I told them what happened, and they both got upset that someone felt compelled to do that. An hour later, someone else was trying to tell me how to fix the paintball guns. I told him I don't need help but thanks anyway, and he still kept trying to tell me what I'm doing wrong. Ha! 8 years of experience working here and I'm still doing things wrong, apparently. I told him, no, this is how you do it. Then the equipment manager came over and asked what I'm doing. I told her that a gun was broken and I'm fixing it. She told me to take it to the main manager because he handles all the fixes. I told her I already talked to him, and he said it's fine. She then radios him in front of me, staring at me like I'm a waste of skin and bones, and asks, hey, OP's trying to fix this gun. Did you give him a thumbs up? He said yes. So, she just hovers over my shoulder to see if I mess up or not, and she's pointing out what I'm doing wrong when I'm doing it correctly. At this point, I'm getting annoyed because everyone's trying to tell me how to do my job or that what I'm doing is wrong. So, I round up the 7 to 8 employees who are trying to stiff-arm me and pull them into the main building. I go to the assistant manager and ask him, who trained you? And he points to me. I ask the main manager, how long have I been working here? And he says, I don't know, 7 to 8 years? He then says to the employees that when he's not around, they basically answer to me and that I'm their boss. I looked at the 7 to 8 employees, all their eyes were wide open. I said, we got off on the wrong foot. You guys don't know me and I don't know you. That's okay. We'll get to know each other, but please don't boss me around when you don't need to. You've been here less than a year, and I've been around the block a few times. The main manager said he was sorry that happened. I said, it's all good, and he just told me to float the park and help out wherever anyone needs help. Basically, do whatever I want for the rest of the day. The way OP handled that situation was simply amazing. He knew that he was more experienced than the other employees, but he kept super calm and chill when they were telling him what he was doing wrong and basically bullying him and making him do grunt work. I would have loved to see their stunned faces when the manager tells them that OP is basically their boss. This story is titled, You're Not the Boss's Kid. I don't really know if it belongs here, but my parents have a business, and when I was around 12 or 13, I used to help out a lot there. It was usually after school when I came in, but whenever I walked in and there were some new workers, they never really questioned it. So one day after school, I went inside and pressed the bell. I saw a man, probably around 35 years old or something, and he looked confused. I look him in the eyes and he just stands in front of the door and looks at me. Then he closes the door, leaving me outside. Great. So I ring the bell again, and I just hear, "Don't open that door." I hear my aunt, who also works there, say, "Why?" And he responds, "There's some idiotic girl, probably begging for money." So I ring the bell a third time, and my aunt pops out and lets me in. I greet her, give her a kiss, and go straight to my parents' office. Right in front of their office, that guy was there again. He told me I couldn't go in because they have a meeting. There was a window where I saw my father sitting in front of my mother because he probably needed help with some documents or something. So I said, "I don't really think they're having a meeting because those are both my parents." The guy says, "No, they aren't. I've seen their kids a lot of times since I've worked here for a really long time." I didn't really remember how long he said it was, but it sure as heck wasn't believable at this point. 12-year-old me didn't care anymore, and I just went right in. I came in, my parents looked at me and tried to greet me, and then that worker just grabbed me by the arm and told them, "I'm really sorry, this kid tried to come in and steal things." My mom then told him to stop, which he already did, and said, "That's my daughter. Don't you dare lie about my daughter stealing." He stared at me in disbelief and stormed right out. My parents fired him. This last story is titled, Friday Evening Dinner. I was sitting in a local restaurant having dinner and a beer after work on a Friday evening. The restaurant wasn't packed and it was nice and quiet. I didn't see anyone I knew, so I just sat there all by myself with my own thoughts, enjoying the meal. When I finished the meal and my beer, I went outside for a smoke. When I came back in, there was a new beer on my table. I asked the waiter if he read my mind and he just smiled at me. After the beer, I ordered a drink and finished it before I went to the toilet to make room for another one. The same thing happened. There was a new drink standing on my table waiting for me. I was puzzled for a bit, but finished it, and then called the waiter to pay my bill. He came over to me and told me that it was already taken care of. What? By who and why? It turned out that a man I didn't know at all paid it all. I thanked him but asked him why, as I clearly didn't know him. He asked me if I remembered that I helped move a large cupboard from a trailer inside a house a year or so ago. I barely did, as it was a long time ago and wasn't anything special. I then remembered it was a day when I was walking around the neighborhood, and he and his pregnant wife had bought the said cupboard, and I helped him carry it into their house. I then told him that it's nice that another customer is paying for my bill and that I appreciate it. He then says that he works here and that he owns the restaurant, and it's his pleasure to give back to me as I helped him back then. This story is titled, I Do Work Here, and Your Vacation is Over. Quite a few years ago, I worked as a ski school supervisor at a mountain resort. One day, early in the season, it was slow, so I decided to go take a run with one of my coworkers. Since I've been on my skis a lot, I opted to grab my snowboard for this particular jaunt. This is important later. So, my buddy and I were out for a couple of runs, and it was time to head back in to check for lessons. We were down off the main mountain and just cruising along Green, which is the easy run that leads back to the base area. Like I said, it was a slow day, so there was nobody around, or so I thought. I was making regular smooth turns on my board when, out of nowhere, I heard a woman from behind me screech. She was screaming, "Get out of the way! Get out of the way!" Before I could even flinch, I felt something hit the tail of my board. I got spun around and went down kind of hard. For a moment the red rage light blinked in my head, but I thought, okay, we're in a beginner area. She might not have had control. It was an accident. Be cool. I pulled myself up from the snow and calmed myself down. I looked down the hill, and there were two Karens standing about 50 yards downhill. Obviously, one of them was the one who hit me. Cool, they've stopped to make sure I'm okay and apologize. I slid down to them and opened my mouth to check if they were okay. Before I could even get one word out of my mouth, Karen 1 started screaming at me. She said, "What the beep do you think you're doing? You could have killed me. You beep snowboarders are a menace. You don't belong on the mountain." And on it went, screaming at me, cursing at me, calling me all sorts of names. One important note, there is a set of rules that govern skiing, and one of them is that skiers and riders ahead of you have the right of way. Just like driving, if you hit someone from behind while you're skiing, you're 100% at fault. I tried to interrupt politely to tell her this, but Karen was having none of it. At this point I was thinking, okay, beep you, Karen. I'm tearing you a new beep once you've finished yelling. I looked over at my buddy for backup and suddenly my rage-filled brain realized something. My buddy was in full uniform. I looked down, black pants, blue and gray jacket with a resort logo on the front and back, bright shiny gold name tag that said supervisor under my name, and a radio mic clipped to my collar. Yeah, I was in full uniform too. At this point, I was dumbfounded. Was this woman seriously screaming and cursing at two mountain employees after she just caused a crash? I got calm and held out my hand for her to stop. I have no idea why, but Karen stopped screaming. I reached up to the radio mic and called Ski Patrol. I asked them to have the patrol director on duty meet me at the base area. It was at this point that it finally dawned on Karen that she'd beep up. She started asking why I called patrol and what I was going to do. I just shrugged. She started saying that she didn't want me following her and to leave her alone. Again, we were almost inside the base. There was nowhere else to go other than to follow this trail down. She realized she was stuck and skied down with her friend. Her friend at this point looked mortified. We got to the base, and the patrol director was standing there with another patroller. I gave a recap of the events, including some of the graphic things she told me to do to myself and multiple family members. The patrol director rolled his eyes, then pulled out wire cutters. Karen went wide-eyed and was like, "No, you can't take my ticket. It's a 5-day ticket. We just got here today. This is our vacation. Tickets are over $75 per day. So we're talking about a $350 ticket that this lady had." The patrol director just shrugged and said, "Well, ma'am, then you just made a very expensive mistake," and clipped the ticket. At that point, my coworker and I beat a retreat back to the ski school because we wanted no part of the fallout. Sometimes people can be so ignorant. This story is titled, Girls Don't Know Anything About Technology Apparently. I was just there to look pretty. Not sure if this is the exact place for this, but I'm going for it. For reference, I'm a 5'2" stick insect of a girl who was 22 at the time and also 6 months pregnant. I was working in a tech store. We sold computers, laptops, phones, music devices, Bluetooth speakers, cables, and so on. We also did lessons where people could sit with us for an hour and we would teach them how to use their devices. Generally, this was taken up by older people who weren't so tech-savvy. One day, there was no one in the store, so my co-workers decided to clear out loads of junk in the back room. Since I was pregnant and there was going to be heavy lifting, they had me manning the floor. Since there was no one in the store, this basically meant that I was just floating about, daydreaming until a guy came in. The uniform was black jeans and a bright blue t-shirt with a store logo on the front and back and a white lanyard with the store name and the worker's name on it. I was wearing this at the time. I went up to the guy and asked if he needed any help. He asked if there were any men available to help him. I told him that while the other staff were there, they were currently busy in the back and would not be available to help customers for some time. I asked him what he wanted help with. He said, "Listen, honey, you're in a delicate condition right now. I wouldn't want to stress your pretty little head, now would I?" I calmly told him that I would be perfectly fine dealing with his issue, but if he wanted to wait for another 2 hours, another member of staff might be available then. He then smirked at me and inquired about one of the laptops on show. He told me that he wanted a gaming computer. Not that you'd know anything about that, sweetheart. I then gave my most jargon-filled speech about the laptop and pointed out that it was not at all suited for gaming. If he wanted a laptop, he would be best picking another model. I pointed out the one best suited for this, gave a jargon-filled speech about that one too, and then smiled as sweetly as I could at him and asked if he was still following. He seemed aghast and actually gasped at me. I was trying so hard not to laugh at him. He asked me how I knew all this stuff. I told him that I'd been gaming since I was 6 years old, built computers for fun, and had a PlayStation, Xbox, PC, and a laptop for gaming. I know my stuff. There's a reason I was hired here. He said nothing for a moment, and then he said, "I guess girls in this shop aren't just to make it look nice, hey?" "No, sir," I replied. "I'm one of the most knowledgeable workers in the store, aside from the manager." Then he just walked out. When he got to the door, I handed him the leaflet we had for the lessons. I said, "If you need anything else explained to you, I'd be happy to help you figure it out, sir." And off he went. I was so pissed that he actually had the gall to speak like that to anyone, let alone a very hormonal pregnant person. He genuinely seemed to think that I was only hired because of discrimination laws, where they had to have at least one female member of staff, and that I was therefore hired to attract male customers with my looks. I know sexism still exists, but I didn't expect to have it shoved in my face like that. This story is titled, "I Actually Work Here." My shirt is right here, covered in your son's blood. This story is from my first job as a soft play supervisor. I was 17 at the time. We all wore turquoise t-shirts, black jeans, and a dark gray cap. I routinely wore a vest underneath because kids are gross, and I almost always ended up covered in some kind of food or bodily fluid, which is important later. I was also a first aider for St. John Ambulance at the time. On this particular Sunday in the middle of summer, we were super quiet. I had just finished a rotation on the drop slide, locked it up, and was coming down the slide through the play area, the way we always did when management wasn't in. As I got my feet to the bottom, I heard a scream from the top. Without thinking, I shoved my shoes on and ran up the slide to the child screaming at the top. When I got there, I immediately shouted for help from a colleague. At the top of the slide was a kid, maybe 3 or 4, whose nose was pouring with blood. I pulled my work top off, knocking my cap off in the process, again important later, and put it to the side of the kid to stop too much blood from getting on the play area. I then asked all the kids around if anyone knew where the kid's mummy or daddy was. One nodded and went down to get them. At this point, my colleague arrived with the first aid kit. I threw the gloves on and started checking the kid over. There were no signs of head or neck injury, no signs of any other injury, so I turned the kid onto his side. Obviously, throughout this I was talking to the kid and asked my colleague to keep an eye on the time the kid coughed a little and spat out some blood. My colleague asked if we should call an ambulance, so I asked her to ring 111, a UK thing where you can get advice, and they'll decide if you need an ambulance or not. My colleague went down and got the phone for me. Just as the colleague left, the entitled mom arrived. She said, "What did you do to my son?" I replied, "Excuse me, sorry, She cut me off. "Take your hands off my baby." At this point, she snatched her child up and tipped his head back. I said, "Sorry, I don't know what happened to him, but you should tip his head forward until his nose stops bleeding. We're calling 111, she snapped. "You stay away. I think I know what's best for my child. How dare you?" I responded, "Ma'am, I'm the first aider. I'm not suggesting that you don't know what's best for your child. I'm telling you that you should tip his head forward to prevent the blood flowing into his mouth." She scoffed. "I have to cover myself?" "Cover yourself. You're a child. What are you talking about?" I said, "I actually work here. My shirt is right here, covered in your son's blood." The entitled mom now looked mortified and immediately tipped her son's head forward over my already blood-soaked shirt. The colleague arrived back with my phone, and I called 111. They sent us to an ECP who checked him over and decided that he needed to go to the hospital to be checked over by a doctor. I got a new worktop, cleaned up that section of the play area, and I got to go home early. The ECP commended my first aid, and the next time I came to work there was a box of chocolates and a card with an apology. If you like the stories, hit that thumbs up button and leave a comment letting me know your thoughts. If you enjoyed the stories today, do hit that like button. I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you, I really do, I mean it.